In a series spanning over 1,000 episodes, survival comes down to strict rules of engagement. World mechanics dictate outcomes, not plot armor. When Conqueror's Haki first appears, it looks like a narrative cheat code. It's introduced as a 1-in-a-million power that operates as an instant win button against massive groups of low-level enemies. But against top-tier, Yonko-level adversaries, raw intimidation carries zero weight. Glaring at an Emperor of the Sea will not win the fight. This creates a blind spot. People often lump Luffy's early, accidental bursts of intimidation together with his late-game, highly technical combat applications. To accurately gauge his growth, we need to stop ranking out-of-context hype moments. We have to evaluate Conqueror's Haki as a strict evolutionary skill tree, with specific inputs, costs, and strategic limits. This chart separates Luffy's physical devil fruit transformations from his willpower-based combat systems, mapping his timeline against the actual combat threat level he faced. His physical power scales on a steady linear incline through his gear transformations. His Haki progression, however, sits at a dormant baseline until a specific crisis point at Marineford forces a violent spike. Those chaotic, irregular spikes eventually smooth out into a controlled exponential curve by the Wano arc, representing absolute mastery over the mechanic. This curve breaks down into 3 distinct evolutionary phases: unconscious reflex, targeted area of effect, and advanced infusion. Following this timeline proves that Conqueror's Haki acts as a highly regulated resource. Moving from one phase to the next demands brutal physical training hurdles. This flowchart maps the first stage of the skill tree, Phase 1, the reflexive burst. Seen early on against the Bison, the Wolf Pack in Impel Down, and the Marineford Executioners. The required input here is entirely reactive. It demands extreme physical distress, near-death scenarios, or massive emotional trauma to trigger the ability. The outcome is a massive, uncontrolled shockwave. It forces surrounding threats to submit and collapse without requiring physical exertion. At Marineford, this activation was so massive, it sent shockwaves through seasoned veterans and admirals, instantly revealing his dormant potential to the world's elite. But Phase 1 comes with a fatal trade-off, a complete lack of targeting. Because it relies strictly on unconscious instinct, the blast discriminates against no one, knocking out vital allies right alongside the enemy. Phase 1 functions entirely as a survival reflex. Its unpredictability makes it a total liability in a strategically planned battle. Following Rayleigh's training, we arrive at the second evolutionary stage. This radar map illustrates Phase 2, targeted area of effect. The input shifts dramatically. Activating this requires focused willpower, emotional restraint, and deep spatial awareness of the battlefield. The outcome is the ability to selectively nullify massive numbers of low-level combatants, completely ignoring allies in the crossfire. We see this at Fishman Island, where Luffy drops 50,000 enemies in a single burst, casually commanding a sprawling army to submit. Fighting 50,000 enemies physically drains vast reserves of gear stamina. Clearing the board with willpower preserves physical energy for the actual war. The trade-off here is a ceiling on lethality. While exceptional for crowd control, Phase 2 is functionally useless for dealing physical damage to high-tier bosses. Phase 2 is a highly efficient stamina-saving tool. It sets the stage, but it does not solve the boss fight. Against villains like Katakuri, Doflamingo, Big Mom, and Kaido, the meta shifts. This requires the final evolution, advanced infusion. Looking at this cross-section of a strike, the input changes completely. Instead of blasting willpower outward, the user actively coats physical strikes with supreme willpower. This internal coating allows the user to bypass physical defenses entirely. It delivers devastating damage directly to targets that were previously invulnerable to blunt force. You can spot this phase immediately by the clashes of pure dominance. The black lightning and extreme environmental pressure signify 2 absolute kings colliding. The trade-off for Phase 3 is severe. It consumes apocalyptic amounts of stamina and willpower, draining reserves far faster than any standard physical exertion. If a user's willpower wavers against a more experienced Yonko during one of these clashes, they suffer overwhelming recoil and instant defeat. Advanced infusion turns Haki from a crowd control convenience into the absolute exhausting entry ticket required to survive at the top tier. All of this establishes a core reality. Conqueror's Haki operates as a strictly regulated resource economy. This matrix scorecard weighs the three phases directly by their cost-to-impact ratio, tracking the shift from external blasts to internal buffs. Phase 2 clears fodder at a remarkably low stamina cost, while Phase 3 provides lethal damage outputs with a massive punishing toll on the user's reserves. Mastering Haki ultimately comes down to precise resource management. Luffy has to calculate exactly when to spend his willpower versus his physical stamina. If you are early in the series, treat those first Haki bursts as a narrative metric of Luffy's latent potential. The unpredictability of the power is a designed, intentional flaw. For those analyzing the late-game meta, area of effect bursts are simply efficiency tools. A top-tier combatant is measured strictly by their capacity to sustain advanced infusion under intense pressure. Look at the sheer distance covered between the dying boys screaming in the icy depths of Impel Down and the seasoned captain trading isolated heavy blows with Kaido. The ultimate flex of Conqueror's Haki is the optimization itself. Luffy took a desperate, uncontrollable survival reflex and refined it into the exact surgical precision required to dethrone a Yonko.